Maya's hands trembled as she swept the small courtyard of their crumbling house. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dirt floor, but it couldn't warm the chill in her heart. Her father sat hunched over at the wooden table, his face buried. In his hands, while her mother paced back and forth like a caged animal, the debt collectors had visited again yesterday. Their voices still echoed in Maya's ears, harsh, demanding, threatening. Her family owed money they could never repay. Her father's small farming business had failed after 3 years of poor harvests. The medical bills from her mother's illness had drained whatever savings they had managed to keep hidden under the loose floorboard. Maya was 19, with long black hair that caught the light and eyes that sparkled with dreams she feared would never come true. She had always been the smartest girl in their village school, but education was a luxury her family could no longer afford. Instead, she spent her days helping neighbors with their children, earning a few coins here and there. The sound of heavy footsteps outside made everyone freeze. 3 men in expensive suits walked through their broken gate. The leader wore gold rings on every finger and smiled in a way that made Maya's skin crawl. Her father stood up slowly, his shoulders sagging. With defeat, the conversation was quick and brutal. The debt was due immediately. They had no money, no property left to sell, nothing of value except one thing. Maya watched in horror as her parents exchanged glances filled with shame and desperation. The man with the gold rings looked at her, with calculating eyes like she was livestock being evaluated at market. Her mother started crying silently, tears streaming down her weathered face. Her father couldn't meet Maya's eyes as he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. They had found a way to pay the debt. Maya would work at a special house in the city. The men would take care of everything. She would be fed, housed, and protected. Maya knew exactly what kind of house they meant. Her stomach turned to ice as the reality hit her. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but she saw the broken look in her parents' eyes. They were drowning, and she was their only lifeline. The men gave them 1 day to say goodbye. Maya spent that evening sitting by the small window in her room, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. She thought about her dreams of becoming a teacher, of traveling to distant cities, of finding love with someone who would cherish her. All of those dreams felt like smoke now, dissolving into nothing. Her mother came to her room late that night, carrying a small cloth bundle. Inside was Maya's grandmother's silver bracelet, the only piece of jewelry their family owned. Her mother pressed it into Maya's hands with shaking fingers, whispering apologies and promises that everything would somehow work out. Maya didn't sleep that night. She listened to her parents talking in hushed, desperate voices in the next room. She heard her father crying, something she had never witnessed before. She understood that they were sacrificing their daughter to save their family from complete destruction. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a heavy stone. When morning came, Maya dressed in her best clothes, a simple blue dress her mother had sewn for her last birthday. She braided her hair carefully and put on the silver bracelet. If she was going to face this nightmare, she would do it with whatever dignity she could gather. The men returned exactly when they said they would. Maya hugged her parents goodbye, feeling their bodies shake with grief and guilt. Her father pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand, their address written in his careful handwriting, so she would never forget where home was. The car ride to the city was long and silent. Maya stared out the window, watching her village disappear behind hills and trees. The landscape gradually changed from rural farmland to busy highways lined with shops and billboards. The city loomed ahead of them, massive and intimidating, filled with more people than Maya had ever seen in one place. The house where they brought her was nothing like what she had imagined. It was elegant on the outside with painted walls and decorative gardens. Inside it was clean and well furnished, but there was something cold and hollow about it. Other girls moved through the hallways like ghosts, their eyes empty and distant. The woman who ran the house explained the rules in a voice that brooked no argument. Maya would work to pay off her family's debt plus interest. She would have food and shelter, but no freedom to leave until every penny was repaid. The amount they quoted made Maya's heart sink. It would take years, maybe decades, to earn that much money. That first night, Maya lay on a narrow bed in a room she shared with two other girls. One was about her age, with sad eyes and needle-thin, scars on her arms. The other was younger, maybe 16, and she cried herself to sleep every night. Maya stared at the ceiling, feeling like she was drowning in an ocean of despair. She touched her grandmother's bracelet and made a silent promise. She would survive this. She would find a way to escape this nightmare and reclaim her life. She didn't know how or when, but she would not let them destroy her spirit. Somewhere deep inside, a small flame of hope still flickered, refusing to be extinguished no matter how dark her world had become. 3 months had passed since Maya arrived at the house, and each day felt like a year. She had learned to navigate the complex web of rules and dangers that governed her new existence. The other girls had taught her which clients to avoid, how to hide money when possible, and most importantly, how to protect her mind by retreating to a safe place inside herself when the world became too brutal to bear. Maya's roommate, Sarah, had been there for 2 years and had developed a hard shell around her heart. She taught Maya practical things, how to apply makeup to cover bruises, which medicines helped with pain, and how to read the moods of the house's enforcers. The younger girl, Lynn, had stopped crying at night, but Maya sometimes caught her staring at the window with a look that worried her deeply. The house operated like a well-oiled machine. Girls were expected to look perfect at all times, to smile and pretend happiness they didn't feel, and to never show weakness or defiance. Maya had quickly learned that rebellion was met with swift punishment that affected not just the rebellious girl, but often her family as well. The system was designed to crush hope and maintain control through fear. Despite everything, Maya refused to let them break her spirit completely. She found small ways to resist, writing messages to herself on scraps of paper that she hid in her mattress, teaching Lynn how to read during quiet moments, and holding on to memories of her life before this nightmare began. She talked to Sarah about dreams and plans, slowly helping her roommate remember that there might be life beyond these walls. On a particularly difficult evening, when Maya felt like she was losing herself entirely, something unexpected happened. A new client had arrived, someone different from the usual men who visited the house. The girls whispered about him in the hallway. He was young, maybe in his 30s, and wore clothes that spoke of serious money. But more than that, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that seemed almost out of place in their dark world. The madam of the house, Mrs. Chen, was unusually nervous about this visitor. She fussed over arrangements, demanded that all the girls look absolutely perfect, and warned them repeatedly about the importance of making a good impression. Maya sensed that this man held some kind of power that even Mrs. Chen feared and respected. When Maya was chosen to serve tea in the main parlor, she caught her first glimpse of him. He was handsome in an understated way, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. But what struck her most was how he looked at the girls, not with the hungry, possessive gaze she had grown accustomed to, but with something that looked almost like compassion. His name was David Chen, and despite sharing a surname with the house madam, he was no relation. He was a successful businessman who had built an empire from nothing, starting with a small technology company that had grown into a multinational corporation. Maya learned these details from whispered conversations between the staff, who treated him with a mixture of fear and respect. David spent several hours at the house that evening, but he didn't behave like other clients. He talked with the girls instead of immediately demanding services. He asked about their lives, their families, their dreams. Some girls were too frightened to respond, but others, sensing something different about him, began to open up carefully. Maya found herself assigned to his table during dinner. As she served him, their eyes met briefly, and she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a flicker of recognition, as if he saw her as a human being rather than a commodity. When he spoke to her, asking simple questions about where she came from, his voice was gentle and genuinely curious. Throughout the evening, Maya noticed David watching everything with sharp, calculating eyes. He observed how the girls interacted with each other, how the staff treated them, and how the entire operation functioned. She got the impression that he was conducting some kind of evaluation, though she couldn't understand what he might be looking for. As the night progressed, David requested to speak privately with several girls, including Maya. In a quiet room away from the main activities, he asked her direct questions that no client had ever bothered to ask. He wanted to know about her family, how she had ended up here, and what she hoped for her future. His questions weren't invasive or threatening. They felt more like an interview for a job she didn't know she was applying for. Maya found herself telling him things she hadn't spoken about since arriving at the house. She talked about her parents, their debt, and her dreams of education and independence. She told him about the other girls and how they had all ended up trapped in this place through various forms of desperation and coercion. David listened without judgment, taking mental notes of everything she said. When their conversation ended, David thanked her for her honesty and returned to the main parlor. Maya spent the rest of the evening wondering what had just happened. There was something different about this man, something that gave her a strange feeling she barely dared to name as hope. The next morning, the house was buzzing with unusual activity. Mrs. Chen was making phone calls and seemed agitated about something. The girls speculated that David's visit had somehow changed something, but no one knew what. Maya went through her daily routine, but her mind kept returning to their conversation and the way he had looked at her, not as a victim or a commodity, but as a person with value and potential. Sarah noticed Maya's distraction and warned her to be careful. Hope, she said, was dangerous in a place like this. It could make someone careless, lead them to make mistakes that would bring punishment down on everyone. Maya understood the warning, but something inside her had awakened during that conversation with David, and she couldn't force it back to sleep. That afternoon, Maya was called to Mrs. Chen's office. She expected punishment for some imagined transgression, but instead found herself facing a conversation she never could have anticipated. David had made an unusual request, one that could change everything for her. As Mrs. Chen explained the situation, Maya felt her heart racing with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Her world was about to change again, but this time, maybe the change would lead somewhere brighter than the darkness she had known for so long. Mrs. Chen sat behind her ornate desk, her fingers drumming nervously against the polished wood surface. Maya stood in front of her, heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone in the building could hear it. The office felt suffocating, with its heavy curtains and the smell of expensive perfume that couldn't quite mask something darker underneath. The offer was unlike anything Maya had ever heard. David Chen wanted to purchase her debt completely, not for the usual reasons that men bought girls from the house, but for something entirely different. He claimed he needed someone trustworthy for his household staff, someone intelligent who could eventually take on responsibilities beyond simple domestic work. The price he was offering was more than double what Maya's family owed, enough to clear their debt entirely and leave money left over. Mrs. Chen explained the terms with barely concealed irritation. If Maya agreed, she would leave immediately, with David. She would work in his home for 1 year, during which time she would receive proper wages, education, and training in business skills. After that year, she would be completely free to choose her own path. The contract was legal and binding, with protections that girls in the brothel never received. Maya's mind raced as she tried to process this information. It sounded too good to be true, like a fairy tale someone might tell to give false hope to desperate people. She had learned to be suspicious of any offer that seemed to promise escape, because such offers usually came with hidden costs that were worse than her current situation. Mrs. Chen was clearly unhappy about the arrangement. Losing Maya meant losing years of profit, and the price David was paying, while substantial, was less than what Maya might have earned for the house over time. But David's influence in the business world made him someone Mrs. Chen couldn't afford to refuse. Maya sensed there were larger forces at play that she didn't fully understand. The decision had to be made immediately. David was waiting in his car outside, and if Maya refused, the offer would be withdrawn permanently. Mrs. Chen made it clear that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that would never come again. Maya would either leave now with David or spend the next decade working to pay off her family's debt through the only means available to her. Maya asked for a moment to think, but Mrs. Chen shook her head. David's time was valuable, and he wouldn't wait for lengthy deliberations. This was a business transaction that required immediate resolution. Maya felt the weight of her entire future pressing down on her shoulders as she struggled to make the most important decision of her life. She thought about her parents, probably lying awake at night wondering if their daughter was still alive. She thought about Sarah and Lynn, trapped in their own cycles of despair with no wealthy savior appearing to offer them escape. She thought about the dreams she had been forced to abandon and the person she had been before this nightmare began. Taking a deep breath that felt like it might be her last as a prisoner, Maya nodded her agreement. Mrs. Chen's expression remained cold and businesslike as she prepared the necessary paperwork. The transaction was completed with the same casual efficiency, used for buying furniture or livestock. Maya signed documents she barely understood, her hand shaking as she wrote her name on papers that would either free her or deliver her into a different kind of bondage. Within an hour, Maya found herself walking out of the house that had been her prison for 3 months. She carried only a small bag containing her few possessions, the silver bracelet from her grandmother, the piece of paper with her family's address, and a few items of clothing. Behind her, she could feel the eyes of the other girls watching, from windows, their expressions mixing envy with concern for what might happen to her next. David's car was expensive, but not flashy, clean and well-maintained in a way that spoke of quiet wealth rather than the need to impress others. As Maya settled into the passenger seat, she caught sight of herself in the side mirror. She looked thinner than before, with shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there 3 months ago. But there was also something new in her expression, a flicker of possibility that she had thought was gone forever. The drive through the city was surreal. Maya watched familiar landmarks pass by, but everything looked different from inside David's car. The streets that had seemed threatening and overwhelming during her arrival now appeared manageable, even navigable. She began to understand that her perspective on the world had changed fundamentally during her time in captivity. David spoke little during the drive, but his presence was reassuring rather than intimidating. When he did talk, it was to point out landmarks or to ask if she was comfortable. His manner was professional but kind, like an employer rather than an owner. Maya found herself cautiously optimistic that maybe, just maybe, she had stumbled into genuine good fortune. His home was located in an upscale neighborhood that Maya had never seen before. The house itself was large, but not ostentatious, surrounded by gardens and tall trees that provided privacy from the street. Everything about it spoke of taste and refinement rather than the aggressive display of wealth that characterized so many rich people's homes. The staff who greeted them at the door treated Maya with respect and curiosity rather than suspicion or hostility. David introduced her simply as a new member of the household who would be learning various responsibilities over the coming months. No one asked questions about where she had come from or why she was there, accepting David's explanation without need for elaboration. Maya was shown to a small but comfortable room on the second floor, with clean sheets, a window that opened to let in fresh air, and most importantly, a door with a lock that she controlled. After months of having no privacy or personal space, the simple luxury of a room of her own felt almost overwhelming. She sat on the bed and touched the lock on the door repeatedly, hardly believing that she had the power to keep others out. That evening, David called her to his study for their first real conversation since leaving the house. The room was lined with books from floor to ceiling, and his desk was covered with papers and business documents. He offered her tea and invited her to sit in a comfortable chair across from his desk, treating her like a guest rather than a servant. There, conversation revealed the true nature of her situation. David explained that he had been investigating businesses like Mrs. Chen's house as part of a larger project aimed at disrupting human trafficking networks. He had been looking for someone with intelligence and courage who could eventually help him understand and expose the systems that trapped people like Maya. Her year of work would indeed involve household duties, but more importantly, it would include education and training that would prepare her for a role in his organization's humanitarian efforts. Maya listened in amazement as David outlined plans for her future that included not just freedom, but purpose, and the opportunity to help others who were still trapped in the darkness she had escaped. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that her story might have a happy ending after all. The first weeks in David's house felt like living in a dream. Maya woke each morning in her own room, ate meals at regular times, and spent her days learning skills she had never imagined she would need. David had arranged for tutors to help her with basic computer skills, business English, and financial literacy. The household staff treated her as a colleague rather than a servant, and slowly, Maya began to remember what it felt like to be treated with dignity. Mrs. Liu, the head housekeeper, became Maya's mentor and friend. She was a woman in her 50s, who had worked for David for nearly a decade, and she understood without being told that Maya was recovering from something terrible. Mrs. Liu taught Maya practical skills like managing schedules, coordinating with suppliers, and handling correspondence, but more importantly, she helped Maya rebuild her confidence through patience and encouragement. David himself was often busy with his business empire, but he made time to check on Maya's progress regularly. Their weekly meetings became something Maya looked forward to, not because she feared disappointing him, but because he genuinely seemed interested in her development as a person. He asked about her goals, her fears, and her growing understanding of the business world. These conversations helped Maya see herself as someone with value and potential, rather than just a victim of circumstance. The most transformative part of Maya's new life was the education David provided. He enrolled her in online courses that covered everything from basic accounting to international law. Maya discovered she had a natural talent for understanding complex systems and finding patterns in information. Her tutors were amazed at how quickly she absorbed new concepts, and David began giving her increasingly sophisticated projects to work on. One evening, David called Maya to his study for a conversation that would change everything. He explained that his investigation into human trafficking had evolved into something much larger, a foundation dedicated to rescuing victims and dismantling the networks that exploited them. He had been watching Maya's progress carefully, and he believed she had the skills and motivation to become a key part of this work. The foundation operated carefully and quietly, working with law enforcement and international organizations to identify and shut down trafficking operations. They also provided support and rehabilitation for survivors, helping them rebuild their lives and, when possible, reconnect with their families. David wanted Maya to consider becoming a coordinator for their rescue operations, using her firsthand knowledge to help save others who were trapped as she had been. Maya was overwhelmed by the magnitude of what David was proposing. The idea that she could transform her traumatic experience into a force for helping others seemed almost too good to be true. But as David outlined the specifics of the work, Maya felt a sense of purpose awakening inside her that was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. The job would require Maya to travel, to interview survivors, and sometimes to go undercover to gather information about trafficking operations. It would be dangerous work that demanded courage, intelligence, and absolute discretion. But it would also give Maya the opportunity to be part of something that could prevent other families from facing the desperation that had led to her own captivity. David was honest about the challenges. The work would sometimes require Maya to revisit painful memories and to witness suffering she couldn't immediately stop. The people they were fighting against were dangerous and well-connected, with resources to retaliate against those who threatened their operations. Maya would need extensive training in personal safety, legal procedures, and psychological resilience before she could take on such responsibilities. Maya asked for time to consider the offer, but even as she spoke, she knew what her answer would be. The scared, helpless girl who had been sold to pay her family's debt was gone. In her place was someone who understood both the darkness of human trafficking and the power of hope and determination to overcome it. She wanted to use her knowledge and experience to make sure other girls wouldn't have to endure what she had suffered. That night, Maya wrote her first letter to her parents since leaving home. She told them she was safe, that their debt was paid, and that she was learning skills that would allow her to build a good life. She didn't tell them the full truth about where she had been or what she planned to do next. That conversation would have to wait until she could see them face to face. But she wanted them to know that their daughter had survived and was finding ways to turn her pain into purpose. The next morning, Maya accepted David's offer. They spent the following weeks planning her training program, which would include everything, from martial arts to international law to psychology. David arranged for Maya to work with former police officers, social workers, and other survivors who had become advocates. Each person she met added new dimensions to her understanding of the fight against human trafficking. Maya's first real assignment came sooner than expected. David received information about a new trafficking operation that was targeting girls from rural areas near Maya's hometown. The intelligence suggested that the operation was using the same methods that had been used to capture Maya, preying on families desperate to pay debts or medical bills. Working with a team of investigators, Maya helped develop a plan to expose the operation before it could trap more victims. Her role was to provide insight into how the traffickers operated and to help identify the signs that families and communities should watch for. The work was emotionally difficult, as it forced Maya to relive her own experience, but it also gave her a sense of empowerment she had never known before. As Maya prepared for her first field assignment, she realized how much she had changed since David had rescued her from the brothel. The frightened girl who had signed those papers in Mrs. Chen's office had been replaced by a young woman with confidence, skills, and most importantly, a mission that gave her life meaning. She thought about Sarah and Lynn, still trapped in that house, and about all the other girls whose stories she didn't know, but whose suffering she could imagine. Soon, if everything went according to plan, she would be in a position to help rescue them and prevent others from sharing their fate. The silver bracelet on her wrist, her grandmother's legacy, had become a symbol not just of her family's love, but of her commitment to fighting for justice and freedom for others who needed someone to believe in them. Maya knew the road ahead would be difficult and dangerous, but for the first time since she was 19 years old, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Her story had become bigger than her own survival. It had become a weapon against the forces that preyed on the vulnerable and desperate. 6 months into her new role with the Foundation, Maya stood in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, her heart pounding as she waited for the signal from the police team positioned around the building. Tonight's operation would shut down one of the largest trafficking rings in the region, and Maya's undercover work had been crucial in gathering the evidence needed for the raid. The months of training had transformed her in ways she never could have imagined. She had learned to fight, to gather intelligence without being detected, and most importantly, to control her emotions even when confronting situations that brought back memories of her own captivity. David had been right about the difficulty of the work, but he had also been right about Maya's strength and determination. This particular case had started when Maya noticed patterns in missing person reports from villages surrounding her hometown. Young women were disappearing under circumstances that seemed familiar, families facing sudden financial crises, offers of work in the city that seemed too good to be true, and then silence. Maya had convinced David to let her go undercover, posing as a desperate farm girl looking for work to help her sick mother. The assignment had required Maya to return to the rural area where she had grown up, staying in a village just 20 kilometers from her family home. It had been emotionally challenging to be so close to her parents without being able to contact them, but Maya knew that maintaining her cover was essential for the success of the operation. Working with local law enforcement, Maya had allowed herself to be recruited by the trafficking ring. She played the role of a frightened, naive girl perfectly, having lived that reality herself not so long ago. The recruiters used the same tactics Maya had experienced: false promises of legitimate work, reassurances about safety and fair wages, and pressure to make quick decisions without consulting family or friends. Maya's handlers brought her to a temporary holding facility where she met 12 other girls who had been lured by similar promises. Seeing their fear and hope reminded Maya powerfully of her own experience, and she had to use all her training to maintain her composure. She gathered names, documented faces, and memorized details about the operation's structure while appearing to be just another victim. The hardest part had been gaining the trust of the other girls without being able to tell them who she really was or that help was coming. Maya found herself becoming a natural leader among the captives, offering comfort and encouragement while secretly documenting everything she observed. Some of the girls were as young as 16, and their stories of family desperation and manipulation broke Maya's heart. Maya had managed to get a message to her team when the traffickers announced they would be moving the girls to their final destination the next evening. The warehouse where they were currently being held would be the perfect place for law enforcement to make arrests and rescue the victims before they could be transported to brothels in distant cities. Now, as Maya crouched behind shipping containers, with the other girls, she listened to the traffickers discussing their plans with casual indifference to human suffering. The leader of the group was a woman who reminded Maya unpleasantly of Mrs. Chen, calculating and cold as she assigned monetary values to each girl based on their appearance and perceived compliance. The signal came at exactly midnight. Police. Officers poured through multiple entrances while Maya moved to protect the other girls from any violence that might erupt. The traffickers were caught completely off guard, and most surrendered without resistance when they realized they were surrounded by armed law enforcement. Maya's role shifted immediately from undercover agent to victim advocate. She helped calm the frightened girls, explained what was happening, and began the process of documenting their stories for the legal cases that would follow. Some of the girls were from her own province, and Maya was able to help coordinate contact with their families. The operation was a complete success. Law enforcement arrested 15 people involved in the trafficking ring and rescued not only the 12 girls Maya had been held with, but also 8 women who had been found in a separate facility. The evidence Maya had gathered would be crucial in prosecuting the entire network and preventing them from resuming operations elsewhere. As the sun rose over the warehouse, Maya watched as the rescued women were loaded into vehicles that would take them to a safe facility where they would receive medical care, counseling, and help reconnecting with their families. Several of the younger girls asked Maya to stay with them, having found comfort in her presence during the ordeal. Maya promised she would visit them during their recovery and help them access the resources they would need to rebuild their lives. David arrived at the scene as the operation was concluding. Maya could see the pride in his eyes as he surveyed. The results of months of careful planning and dangerous undercover work. This raid would not only save these particular women, but would also disrupt a network that had been operating for years, potentially saving hundreds of future victims. Later, that morning, in a quiet moment at the Foundation's offices, David and Maya reviewed the intelligence gathered during the operation. The trafficking ring had been more extensive than they had originally believed, with connections to operations in 3 different countries. The information Maya had obtained would be shared with international law enforcement agencies, potentially, leading to even larger operations in the coming months. Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she compiled her final report on the operation. Each name she documented, each detail she recorded, represented not just evidence for prosecution, but also hope for families who had been wondering what happened to their daughters. The scared girl who had once been trafficked herself had become someone who could fight back against the system that had victimized her. As she prepared to leave the office, Maya made a decision she had been considering for weeks. It was time to visit her parents and tell them the truth about where she had been and what she was doing now. They deserved to know that their daughter had not just survived her ordeal, but had transformed it into a mission to protect others. Silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light as she gathered her papers. Her grandmother's gift had seen her through the darkest period of her life and had been with her as she discovered her strength and purpose. Soon she would wear it home to show her parents that their daughter had become someone they could be proud of, someone who had turned tragedy into triumph through courage and determination. Maya knew there would be more operations, more danger, and more opportunities to save lives. The fight against human trafficking would never be easy or simple, but she had found her place in that fight, and she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. 2 years had passed since Maya's rescue from the brothel, and she stood at the gate of her childhood home, her hand trembling as she reached for the familiar wooden handle. The house looked smaller than she remembered, but the garden her mother had tended showed signs of new prosperity. Healthy vegetables growing in neat rows and fresh paint on the shutters. Maya wore a simple business suit that reflected her new position as a senior coordinator for David's foundation. Her hair was shorter now, styled in a way that projected confidence and professionalism. The frightened girl who had left this place was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her purpose in fighting the darkness that had once consumed her. Her mother appeared in the doorway before Maya could knock, as if she had been watching the road for months. The 2 women stood frozen for a moment, taking in the changes that time and experience had wrought. Maya's mother had gray in her hair now, but her eyes were brighter than Maya remembered, free from the desperate worry that had haunted them during the debt crisis. Their embrace lasted for several minutes, both women crying tears that washed away years of separation and uncertainty. Maya's father emerged from the house, moving slowly, but with dignity restored. The successful conclusion of several foundation operations had generated enough funding to completely pay off their remaining debts and provide additional support for Maya's family, though they didn't know their daughter was responsible for their improved circumstances. Over dinner that evening, Maya told her parents the truth about where she had been and what she was doing now. She spoke carefully, wanting to be honest without causing them unnecessary pain about the details of her captivity. Her parents listened in stunned silence as she explained about David's rescue, her training, and her work with the foundation. Her father wept when he understood that his daughter had transformed the suffering caused by his failures into a mission to save others. Maya assured him that she held no anger toward him or her mother for the impossible choice they had faced. She had come to understand that desperate people often had no good options, and that the real villains were those who preyed on that desperation. Maya's mother wanted to know about the other girls Maya had mentioned from the brothel. Maya was able to tell her that Sarah had been successfully extracted 6 months earlier during another foundation operation and was now receiving counseling and job training. Sarah had even sent Maya a letter, thanking her for never giving up, hope and for showing her that survival was possible. The news about Lynn was more complicated. Maya had learned that the younger girl had been moved to another facility before the foundation could locate her. The search was continuing, and Maya refused to stop looking until Lynn and girls like her were found and freed. Each rescue operation led to information about other victims, creating a network of hope that was slowly dismantling the trafficking systems from within. During her week at home, Maya visited her old school and spoke with teachers about warning signs that might indicate students were being targeted by traffickers. She arranged for the foundation to provide educational materials about human trafficking to rural communities, helping families recognize and avoid the deceptive tactics used by recruiters. Maya also met with local law enforcement officials, sharing her expertise about how trafficking networks operated in rural areas. She helped them develop protocols for identifying potential victims before they could be transported to urban centers. The foundation provided funding for training programs that would help police officers recognize the difference between voluntary migration for work and coercive recruitment for exploitation. On her last evening at home, Maya sat with her parents in the same courtyard where she had swept floors while debt collectors threatened their family. The contrast between that desperate time and their current stability was remarkable. Her father had started a small business again, this time with proper financial planning and support from a microfinance program the foundation had helped establish in the region. Maya's mother gave her a new gift to replace the silver bracelet that had sustained her through so many trials. It was a small pendant made from a piece of their family's land, a smooth stone polished by generations of hands and blessed by the village elder. Maya wore it alongside her grandmother's bracelet, carrying symbols of both her heritage and her transformation. The journey back to the city gave Maya time to reflect on how much her life had changed since that terrible day when she had been sold to pay her family's debt. She thought about the girls who were still trapped in situations like the one she had escaped, and about the networks of traffickers who continued to operate despite increasing pressure from law enforcement and advocacy organizations. Maya's work with the foundation had expanded beyond rescue operations. She now helped develop policies for survivor rehabilitation, trained law enforcement officers across multiple countries, and spoke at international conferences about the realities of human trafficking. Her first-hand experience, combined with her analytical skills and determination, made her a powerful voice in the global fight against modern slavery. David had offered Maya opportunities to pursue formal education at prestigious universities, but she had chosen to continue her learning through practical experience and specialized training programs. She felt that her real education had come from the streets, from survivor stories, and from the complex challenge of dismantling criminal networks that operated across borders and cultures. The foundation had grown significantly since Maya joined, partly due to her contributions to successful operations that had garnered international attention and funding. Maya now supervised a team of investigators and coordinated with similar organizations around the world. Her story had become a symbol of hope for other survivors, proving that victims could become victors and that personal trauma could be transformed into social change. 1 year later, Maya stood in a courtroom watching as Mrs. Chen and her associates were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The evidence Maya had helped gather during undercover operations had been crucial in securing convictions that would keep these traffickers off the streets for decades. Maya felt a sense of closure as she watched the woman who had once controlled her life being led away in handcuffs. That evening, Maya received a letter that changed everything. It was from Lynn, the young girl who had cried herself to sleep in the brothel room they had shared. Lynn had been found and rescued during a multinational operation, and she was now safe in a rehabilitation facility. In her letter, Lynn thanked Maya for giving her hope during their darkest moments and for never stopping the search for missing girls. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears of joy streaming down her face. This was why she did the work, why she faced danger and relived trauma over and over again. Every girl saved, every family reunited, every trafficker imprisoned was a victory against the forces that had once seemed unstoppable. As Maya prepared for her next assignment, an undercover operation in Southeast Asia that would take months to complete, she thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. Her silver bracelet and stone pendant clinked softly together as she packed, symbols of a journey that had taken her from victim to survivor to warrior in the fight for human dignity. Maya's story had come full circle, but it was far from over. There were still girls who needed saving, families who needed protecting, and systems that needed dismantling. Maya was ready for all of it, armed with experience, determination, and, most importantly, the knowledge that no matter how dark the world might seem, there was always hope for those brave enough to fight for it. The scared 19-year-old who had been sold to pay her family's debt was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had transformed her pain into power and her survival into service. Maya's real life had begun the day David offered her a choice, but her true purpose had emerged when she decided to use that choice to help others find their own paths to freedom.